What's up, everyone? We're back with another episode of The Bird's Nest. As always, I'm Tanner Gomartin alongside Max Gritzula. And today we're coming after a tie, 23-23. The Bengals and the Eagles tied it up. Carson Wentz, 29 for 47, 255 yards, and a touchdown with two interceptions. That seems to be the theme for him going on, two interceptions each game. You have Joe Burrow on the other side, 31 of 44, 312 yards, two touchdowns. It seems like he was the better quarterback, and I don't think I'll get an argument from Max on this one. And we saw Sanders, he rushed 18 times, 95 yards, and couldn't find the end zone. So last show we discussed there might be a little uncertainty with Sanders and what production he can have and the consistency. But Max, let's just get right into it. Does this feel like a loss to you? Because it feels like a loss to me.
Definitely feels like a loss. Definitely feels like a loss, especially the end of that game. Bengals get it. They can't move the ball into field goal territory, so we get it back. And then, we had the false start there. And then Pederson decides to punt it away and not kick the field goal, which is kind of out of the question at that point. You're talking about a 63, 64-yard attempt. And then, he stated post-game that he probably should have went for it, but, everybody can play Monday morning quarterback. Not that I agree with the decision, but it is what it is. You got to live with it. At least we didn't lose, but it definitely does feel like a loss. 0-2-1 is not where you want to be, but at least it's better than 0-3.
No, I actually wanted to get back to that Matt Pryor's false start. And if you were coach on that Sunday in Philadelphia, what call are you making? I know you said it's easy to be coaching on a Monday after the game, but what decision would you make?
I would have punted the football, honestly. I figured at that point, Jake Elliott, the risk probably wouldn't be worth the reward in that point, or in that case. The odds of making that field goal are very slim, and then you're giving the ball back to Joe Burrow with time still left on the clock. And honestly, if they completed a quick 7, 8, 9-yard pass, got out of bounds, then they would be able to send out their kicker, Randy Bullock, to try a field goal to win it. So I know you never want to play for a law or for a tie. You always want to play for the win. But in that case, I think Doug made the right call, and especially because our division is so terrible. You never know what happens down the road.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you put Jake Elliott in to kick now a 65-yard field goal or more, you're just putting pressure on him. He misses it. There goes his morale for games to come. And then you miss that, and then the Bengals have a chance to go ahead and score. And I do understand people saying that it seemed like Doug was scared to lose the game. But at that point in the game, I mean, some might say go for it. I can see both sides, but I understand them not putting Jake Elliott out there to kick what might have been the longest field goal of his life.
Yeah, I know he had that 61-yarder a few years back, but, I mean, that's asking a lot of your kicker to kick a 64, 65-yarder.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go more into the Bengals play. I mentioned Joe Burrow's stats and how he was the best quarterback on the field. Go into what you saw from Joe Burrow and how he sort of performed at a pretty good level during the game.
He played really well. I'm impressed. I think most people expect him to be okay as a starter this year. Not great, but listen, that offensive line for Cincinnati is just awful. They couldn't run the ball as well. So he's not getting any pass protection. You saw it in overtime. The Eagles' defensive line was able to just overmatch the offensive line for Cincinnati and sack Burrow a bunch of times, 8 times to be exact, for 56 yards lost. And that was big in the game. Our defense played okay. I mean, especially the defensive line. But Burrow, he made a couple really nice plays. And for Mixon to only carry the ball 17 times for 49 yards, and Burrow only ran it once for -1 yards. So you're looking at 18 carries for the Bengals for only 48 yards. So to not have any ground game, to not have any protection, and to still throw 31 of 44, 312 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. He sacked 8 times. We mentioned last game how there was sort of a concern about this defense and how they can perform late in the game. You saw it here. Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, they were doing good at the end of the game. I mentioned the 8 sacks. And now you look to the offense, and Carson Wentz is the problem. What else needs to be done?
Well, first of all, you have to get skilled players on the outside to help him out here. Greg Ward, 8 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. That came out of nowhere. And that's one thing that's been inconsistent with this team is one game it's Dallas Goedert with 8 catches and 100 yards, in week one. This game it's Greg Ward, 8 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Like, there's no consistent receiving threat. I know that Goddard got hurt yesterday. He might miss some time. Doug Pederson said post-game. But, when you have John Hightower out there playing the most snaps out of every receiver, you're not going to win too many football games. You're not going to score too many points.
Right. Jackson, he has 2 catches for 11 yards, and that just adds to the pain of having DeSean Jackson on this team, but not really getting to see Djax. I don't know if maybe he's been focused on. I saw he dropped a song a few days ago. Maybe he's just focused on that, and he's not really focused on winning. I don't know, but it's really concerning to see him on the sidelines aching, and then just to see his lack of production on the field. Now, you could go and blame that on Carson Wentz, of course. It's easy to do so on the quarterback, but what do you think is going on with that?
Well, DeSean Jackson, I think as a Philadelphia fan, you might be expecting a little too much out of him if you're expecting, 6 catches for 80 yards every game, right? He's not that player anymore. He's also not on the field enough to do that. I also don't like the fact that we're spreading the ball around to so many receivers. I don't think that's Carson's fault because, Ertz hasn't been that same threat that he was, in previous years. I mean, he did have 7 catches for 70 yards, but a big part of that was that Goddard was out of the game pretty early on. So, you look at better teams out there right now, and you look at like the Packers, for example, they're going to throw the ball to Devontae Adams a billion times a game. Alan Lazard, another receiving threat, stepped up big last night for them. And then you have other guys who Rodgers will give maybe a handful of targets to, maybe 2-3 targets a game. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and I'm just naming this for an example, but when you have like 8, 9, 10 guys catching a pass a game, there's no consistency there, and that's kind of the issue. Like, Wentz doesn't have a go-to guy. We thought it would be Zach Ertz again, but Greg Ward led the team in targets yesterday with 11. So every game is something new, and there's been no consistency with this team so far this year, and that's a big reason why they're 0-2-1.
Right. Now, let's look ahead to this challenging game stretch that we have ahead of us. I know we got the Niners, the 49 or the Steelers, and so on. It's just very challenging. At this point, it seems like there won't be any win anytime soon. You have now, as I mentioned, the 49ers, who were a little banged up. Jimmy G didn't play. Jared, you have Kittle and Coleman and Mostert, but Nick Mullins, he stepped up, 340-plus yards and a touchdown. What does this team need to do going forward? I know it's hard to say now because it looked so easy on paper against the Bengals. You just had to focus on one player. It was Joe Burrow, but then it turns out it was more dynamic than that. What does this team do going forward against the 49ers?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a tall task. That's a big question, and you can answer so many different ways. First off, they got to fly across the country. That's easier said than done. I know that we've both taken flights out there just as vacations or something. That's a long flight, and especially for a team coming off a tie that really felt like a loss. And the situation that they're in right now is just not a good one to be in. No one wants to be in that situation. So off the bat, you have no motivation, you have no momentum. And now you have a 49ers team that's probably going to get a little healthier, right? They're probably going to get George Kittle back. Garoppolo might return. It's up in the air. We'll see. Mostert probably won't return. So it's going to be tough. I guess you have to hope that Garoppolo doesn't play, and maybe you can get some pressure on Mullins. I know the defensive line played pretty well yesterday. Fletcher Cox had a few nice plays. Brandon Graham stepped up big time and looked really solid. So Darius Slay's been really good as well. which you expected when you paid him that money. But he really played good shadow coverage yesterday on A.J. Green. But we're missing pieces on defense. Nate Gary, when he's your leading tackler, that's a problem. Let's just say, to say the least, right? Jalen Mills, poor play yesterday, a couple bad penalties, one in the end zone on the defensive pass interference, which led to the T. Higgins touchdown. So it's gonna be a tough task. I think you just got to take this 1 week at a time. And when you look at some positives, if there is one right now, it's that you're playing in the NFC East with an awful Giants team still on your schedule twice. You still have a pretty awful Washington football team on your schedule one more time as well. And the Cowboys, who knows with them? I mean, they get blown out early on in that game against Seattle, fight their way back, and still lose. So if you're going to take a positive away from all of this, it's got to be the fact that you're playing in a horrible division.
And you mentioned Darius Slay, who I'm not comfortable with how his health is in these last couple of games. He's been dinged up a few times already, and it's just it's just another name to add to the list of injuries sometimes, and it's concerning. And now we go into this conversation about tanking. What do you think about that? What do you think about tanking?
Honestly, I think we might not even need to tank because we're probably the bottom 5 team in the league right now. So we might not even have to tank. It might just happen on its own. So one thing I don't want to see is Jalen Hurts to get thrown into this fire in week like 7 or 8. I mean, it does nothing to help his progress. I mean, I guess one thing you can say is he gets NFL experience, but he's got no weapons around him. He's got a decent to below average to below average offensive line. Darius Slay, like you mentioned, has been banged up, but he has played well, and the defense really hasn't done much to help out the offense, and the offense hasn't done much to help out the defense. But the defense is definitely not the number one reason we lost that game yesterday. You have to look to coaching, you have to look to Carson Wentz and his play. But another positive we can take out of this is Miles Sanders, who I'm starting to really buy into as a 3-down running back. Yesterday, he had 18 carries, 95 yards, average 5.3 yards per carry. He's looking like a true workhorse out there. So you have a running back, and he's been banged up too, but hopefully you can stay healthy and you have that going for you as well. But I just don't want to see Hurts get thrown into this dumpster fire, and then all of a sudden people are going to sit here and say, "Oh, Hurts can't do it too." Hurts isn't good either. But I mean, really, what does he have to work with?
Right, you can't throw him into the ring without any protection. That's for sure. So just to round out the conversation, as we mentioned, we got the 49ers coming up without Bosa over there, and they've got a few injuries to work on. But Max, are you seeing any light at the end of this tunnel? Do you see any wins anytime soon?
No, truly, I do not see any wins. I don't see how you can with how much, like I mentioned on the last show, the turmoil that I really think is building inside, and it hasn't come out into the public yet. But I definitely know there's turmoil. I know there was a disagreement with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Howie Roseman. That rumor came out. They had a screaming match on the field before yesterday's game. So I think there's tensions building in that locker room. And when you have bad quarterback play, questionable coaching decisions, inadequate defense, GM who really doesn't have or really hasn't provided any weapons for Wentz or any depth anywhere on the offensive line at all and things like that. It's just going to keep building up, and eventually, like a volcano, man, it's going to explode. And we'll see who's here and who's not here when this is all said and done. But this season, man, I don't see any light. Like I said, the only positive you can take away is that the division's terrible, but I guess we still have 2 games against the Giants. Could be a couple wins there. I don't think ultimately it's going to be enough to make the playoffs, though.
Right, yeah, and for all those Eagles fans out there, they've been through seasons like this before. We were a little spoiled these past couple of seasons, but it should eventually get better, hopefully. Our parents went through some bad times with this team, and we deserve to go through a little bit of it. All right, guys, that wraps up our show. We saw some history with this game. Last time the Eagles won had an overtime tie was November 16th in 2008 against the Bengals. So we'll look forward to next week and see what kind of history we can